The one thing you can't say about the Manatee County School Board since Scott Hopes has been there, it's been boring. Hopes was appointed by Governor Rick Scott to finish the term of Karen Carpenter. He was quickly made chair, and that's when all the fun began. There have been clashes with school board members like Dave Miner, attempts by other board members to remove him as chair. He's now running for a full term on the school board. There is no arguing with his creds. On paper, he's a former member of UFS Board of Trustees and the corporate executive. He is running against Joe Stokes, a longtime educator, former director of elementary schools in Manatee County, 45 years in public education. And tonight, the Manatee County School Board District 4 debate, and we welcome Scott Hopes and Joe Stokes. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. We're going to start by giving you both a minute for opening remarks. And Scott, why don't we start with you?
Well, Alan, thank you for having both of us on your show this evening. I'm Dr. Scott Hopes, and I am chairman of the Manatee School Board. Since my tenure as board chairman, we've balanced the bank accounts. We have a 5.1% fund balance, nearly $30 million. We've improved our school grades, and we are making progress towards an A district.
Joe.
Thank you, and I do appreciate being here as well. And it's the first time I've run for office, and as a new candidate, this has been a very exciting time for my family and myself. A little different twist in my intro here. I want to thank so many people that have stood by this campaign. If you've given $1, waved a sign, supported our Facebook site. So I'd like to say thank you as we're going into the last 3 weeks. I appreciate the support that I've had from the community. I feel like a grassroots candidate, and that takes a lot of people to make that happen. And so I'm just very appreciative of that, and thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll be back with our first question in a moment, so stay with us. Welcome back tonight, the Manatee County School Board District 4 debate, and we welcome Scott Hopes and Joe Stokes to the trapezoid once again. And gentlemen, as I've put it to you before, elections are always about whether the incumbent should be rehired or fired by the boss, which is the voters out there. So Scott, why should voters allow you to keep your job?
Well, I think the critical point with the district that now, based on the outcome of the primary election, is the board will have basically 2 school teachers and 2 mature attorneys, and I am the only board member that has the experience, the financial and business acumen to be able to ask the difficult questions and hold administration accountable on financial matters. So really you're looking at, do you want a board that's made up of 3 school teachers and educators and 2 attorneys, none of which have the business or financial acumen or experience overseeing budgets, you know, of hundreds of millions of dollars a year in a very transitional period. I was appointed by the governor because we knew the district was going to be going through a transition. I was well aware that the superintendent was going to be leaving within the year. I think the next person who knew it after I was Charlie Kennedy. And so I went into the board position knowing that it was going to be a challenge from a leadership perspective to help the district overcome the financial challenges and the transition challenges that come with a change of administration with very little notice.
Joe, why should voters fire Scott?
Well, I think you, in your introduction, alluded to some of an issue, that there is a leadership issue on the board. This idea that only a business person can know business when it comes to school finance is really something quite different. School finance has a lot of scripted funds by the government. It's not, I can move from here to there that easily. When you look at our financial status, Board Chair Hopes refers to a situation that looks like we were in dire needs when he came. That is not true. The dire need year was 12-13. And since that time, the boards that were before this board had already laid the groundwork for improvements. Our fund balance in 2017 was $25 million, almost 26. It was $3 million higher this year. Now that shows that the last few years haven't been the same problems that were initially when the board had to remove the superintendent in 12-13. The idea that educators can't work on a board with a superintendent, with a CFO, with a board attorney and come to the same conclusions and results, I think would be undercutting what people can do. I've had to keep track of school budgets. I've had to work with budgets in my own house. Everybody knows that there are fundamentals in budgeting that translate to other endeavors. So the idea that there's only a certain number of people that can be on the board from a certain persuasion in the community, I don't think holds up. If you look at leadership, regardless of how much I know, do I have influence on the other board members to move the board ahead and make decisions with the superintendent?
Okay, we are going to take a quick break, and our debate for District 4 of the Manatee County School Board continues. Welcome back. Tonight, the Manatee County School Board District 4 debate, and we welcome again Scott Hopes and Joe Stokes. And Scott, let me ask you this question, and we talked about this when you guys were here during the primary. Obviously, there's been a lot of personality conflicts, to put it politely, amongst you and some of the other board members. At one point, they even tried to remove you as chair. I would imagine a great deal of voters watch this and are just, tired of the bickering. We have enough of it in Washington. Do we really need it on the school board? People just want to get things done. So how would you address people who are watching this tonight and thinking exactly that?
Well, as I mentioned before, first of all, anytime a governor appoints someone to replace an elected official on a board, you're going to have a sense of division. This school board had some pretty significant issues long before I got on the board. One of those board members, brought 3 chainsaws to a board meeting, took his clothes off, took his shirt off in a board meeting. The board, as I mentioned before when we were here, needed to learn how to function as a board. What are the roles? What are the individual responsibilities? And we embarked upon training, and we came out of it at the end of the summer earning Master Board certification from the Florida School Board Association. And it took work. I knew the challenges that we would be facing from going to board meetings long before the governor appointed me. There was a lot of work that went on. Karen Carpenter and other former board members, gave me, some warnings.
Fair enough, Joe?
No, it's not fair enough. It's like if you come into a new situation, for example, when I came to King Middle School, there were people that said, be careful about this, be careful about this person, this school has this reputation. And I'm the type of leader that you need to find out for yourself. If I make assumptions about the people on the board, and those assumptions get in the way of my relationship with that board member, I think that I'm setting myself up for a set of problems. So when I went to King Middle School, I knew not a soul. I established a relationship with people that was based on trust, civility, and trying to understand what other people had to offer before I decide what I've got to offer. There's a give and take that you're at a board, you're working with 5 people. And it's not a large organization, so everything is magnified, plus you're on a TV set, plus you've got the community newspaper and so on. So I think the relationship building is an important piece.
Joe, let me ask you this question. Your reputation, you're a fine educator, but what people say in town is you're part of the old network in Manatee County, and you're part of the club. And what's needed is somebody from the outside to mix it up a little bit, because obviously this school district and school board has had its share of problems over the years.
Well, I don't know what club that is. I came here from Indiana in 2004, so I don't have a history with the people of this county, except at that starting point. It's not like I knew a lot of people when I came here. When I was a middle school principal, I knew the middle school individuals. I was then the director of elementary schools, and that was the job where I didn't, again, know the administrators. I knew them by name, but I didn't have this long relationship with the people I supervised.
All right, we have to take a quick break. We are just getting warmed up on our debate for District 4, the Manatee County School Board. It will continue right after this, so stay with us. Welcome back tonight, the Manatee County School Board District 4 debate, and we welcome back Scott Hopes and Joe Stokes. And Scott, I want to give you a chance to respond to Joe's comments from a moment ago.
Thank you. Before the break, my opponent was just talking about the sort of behavior of the board, and I think what's important is the board in the past 3 or 4 months has really come together and done the work. And when you talk about assumptions in a situation like that, you don't make assumptions. You do a root cause analysis. You figure out the source of where the conflict is, and then you address it. And that's what this board has done. After the election, I assure you, everything will settle down, nobody's going to be posturing, and we're going to again focus on doing the work of the people.
Well, let me ask you about the work of the people. There are a lot of things that you have to juggle, including finding a new superintendent of schools, dealing with the budgetary issues and the modernization issues. Obviously, the board has been in a position to rebuild its reputation after years. What is the most important, in your opinion, challenge that the school board has in front of it? The one thing.
Well, the one thing is putting together a strategic plan and recruiting a new superintendent. I, like the other board members, are working with Superintendent Saunders, weekly, if not daily, to provide that support. But at least the last 5 superintendents of this district have never been superintendents before. And you don't hire someone who's never done the job and expect some incredible outcome. And so we need to recruit a strong leader for the district. Then you have less reliance on the diversity and expertise of the board, and you can have a board that supports you. That's not where the district is today. Where the district is today is we have a lot of rebuilding to do. We have complex problems that are going to require deliberate solutions, and it requires experience to help guide it.
Joe, the one big challenge that this school board has, the top priority.
I do not disagree with the issue of acquiring a great superintendent. And I think that one thing that is important for us to think about when we are casting a wide net to see if we can find the best superintendent possible for this district. And I concur that I do believe it needs to be an experienced superintendent. And what would make a superintendent want to come here? I think we look at the situation and say what we want, but what does that great individual who's working somewhere right now see in Manatee County? And one of the things that we have to be able to offer, I believe, is a board that is unified, a board that knows what its role is. And I think that when we look at the last year, that the board has often been the headline maker and not the superintendent.
All right, there are 2 areas that I want to make sure that we get to, and one is school safety. Obviously, the legislature in the aftermath of Parkland passed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, and that basically forced every school district to have at least one kind of SRO or guardian in its schools. But school districts like Manatee, Sarasota, across the state have struggled to fill those positions. And there's already been some criticism. In Manatee County, there was one guardian who has already been removed because it turns out after the fact it was discovered he had some very disturbing Facebook posts on all sorts of really kind of crazy things. So, Scott, did Manatee go about this program either the wrong way in terms of being forced to rush into hiring guardians, or what does the legislature have to do in terms of either financially backing this kind of program or changing what's required?
Well, first, we didn't rush into it. I mean, now granted, all the districts in the state had limited time, and as you know, I wasn't willing to wait a week. Dr. Green wanted to wait a week before we brought the board together, and the police chiefs and the sheriff's deputies and the experts. And we came together and we had armed law enforcement officers in every one of our schools before any district in the state. With regards to the Guardian program, we worked regularly with the police department chiefs and the sheriff, and they literally did not have the officers to have a sustainable school resource officer force for the coming school year. And so we had to exercise the only other option that we had available to us, which was for the sheriff and his department and the Manatee Technical College Police Academy to train guardians. And we have a plan. The sheriff and I worked out a plan to transition some of his deputies into school resource officers by the fall of August 19.
Joe, are you concerned about the safety background checks that were done? Do you agree with this kind of program in terms of making sure that there's someone in the schools that have proper background checks and properly trained?
Well, I've, from the very beginning of the campaign, whether I was in a campaign or not, I want an officer of the law in the school building. Now, the board dropped the ball with the city council, in my opinion, because the city council had worked out a situation where they were going to have an officer in every school. I was at the city council meeting. There was no representative from the school board at that meeting. And the city council was going to spend more money to have an officer in every city school. That does include the county. The school board didn't accept it. Going back to the county, I met with Sheriff Wells, and I asked him a question. I said, did you have the staff? Because I had heard that you didn't have the staff to supply an officer in every school. And he sort of bristled, and he said, I would have made sure that we would have been able to have an officer in every school. I'm responsible for the resources. I would have worked with the school district to make sure that would have occurred. Oh. So I think we could have done better.
All right, Scott, I think you want 30
yeah,
seconds to rebut.
Because it wasn't the board dropped the ball. It was the deputy superintendent that was negotiating with the district under the former superintendent's direction. And as soon as the former superintendent was gone, and as soon as we had the issue with the deputy superintendent, the superintendent and I met with the county and met with the sheriff's department and got it back on track. There was not enough time and there were not enough officers to adequately train to have them in place.
Right,
it wasn't the board, it was the administration. And that's why it's important for a board to understand what questions to ask of administration to get to the root cause of the problem.
All right, let me ask you both about a larger picture issue here. Ron DeSantis, the Republican nominee for governor, one of the things he wants to do in terms of public education in Florida is to expand the voucher program, which may allow children from families that may not be able to afford it attend a private school. Joe, the criticism of that, of course, is that you're taking money away from the public schools in order to send kids to private school. So are you for or against this?
I would not be for that. It's kind of a house divided against itself. If I'm taking and say that, and I've heard my opponents say that the money should follow the child, but there's nothing else that follows the child. If you look at a private school, they don't have the accountability measures that we do in the public school. A private school can say, I'm going to take this child or I'm not going to take this child. The public school is the only school that when somebody comes to the door, they take that child. No questions asked. They can go to the public school. That isn't true for the charters, and it's not true for the private school.
Scott?
Well, I think DeSantis in his candidacy, there's two things, and one is school choice. He is proposing to do that, and also to expand technical programs. And I think with regards to school choice, I believe the vouchers is a school choice program, so a voucher program. The issues that need to be addressed in the voucher program is to ensure that there's a level playing field, that the outcome goals are the same. There's a different process that you go through. And keep in mind with the voucher program, companies are putting money into those programs specifically to provide that opportunity. And I don't want a parent to be limited in where their child goes to school based on their zip code.
Okay, I wish we had more time for questions, but we have to go to the closing statements. And Joe, you went second for opening, so you go number one now.
Well, I'd like to point to some endorsements that I've received during this campaign, and they are pretty broad. From the school MEA, from the Suncoast retired teachers, from the Black Bloc Vote, from Indivisible East, from the Observer Group, from the Gulf Coast Builders Exchange, from the Realtors Association for Manatee and Sarasota County, and from our own Counselors Association in the school district. And what do those individual groups see in me as opposed to my opponent? And I think it's a fair question for the voters. We've already had one referendum, and it was on August 28th. And I did have the most votes on that day. So when we look at the head-to-head opportunities that we've had together, I think when I say I'm the grassroots candidate, I think that's true. And including in that is the funding, that if you want to look and see online that where my money comes from, where his money comes from, I think that's also an opportunity to see where we are in this campaign.
And Scott, you get the last word.
Thank you, Alan. I'm Dr. Scott Hopes. I'm the chairman of the Manatee County School Board, and I want your vote on November 6th. I have both the academic credentials and the experience to ensure that our district stays on course and continues our progress to #1 in the state in student success and fiscal responsibility. I've taught school. I've been in the public classroom. I've taught elementary school through high school, all the way through university and doctorate programs. But more importantly, I have the business acumen and experience. I have the financial acumen and experience. I served on the Board of Trustees of the University of South Florida System with a $2.1 billion annual budget and as many students as we have in Manatee County. I know how to ask the tough questions, and I know how to hold the administration accountable to ensure that you get value for your tax dollars and our children get a great education right here in Manatee County. Thank you for your vote.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much, and good luck on the campaign trail the next couple of weeks. We want to thank our guests, Scott Hopes and Joe Stokes.